Do you hear me, Arthur? You just need to sign these papers and that's it. My wife, Annie, the person who has been married to me for over 25 years, is speaking to me. I try to listen, but her voice is getting farther and farther away. The longer her monologue to me. It all started this afternoon. When I came home from work, she was sitting at the table with a glass of wine in her hand, with a determined expression on her face. But unfortunately, she only prepared a glass for herself. She drank it because the conversation became complicated. She didn't think I might like it, or consider the direction of the conversation. I might also need a drink. I knew something was wrong when I sat down. She didn't ask how my day was. She just immediately let me know she's leaving me. Annie has found her soulmate. Someone who makes her heart sing in a way I could never do. I'm no longer good enough for her. Hearing her words is hard for me. The problem is, as her voice gets louder, everything sounds quieter to me. Our story is quite typical. Annie and I met in high school and have been together ever since. Our daughter Sally was born about 6 months after we got married. She wasn't the main reason we got married, but she was on the agenda. Today we both have good jobs, although we are not rich. I would say we are upper middle class. We paid off the house a few years ago, and we have a decent savings account. We often say we love each other. Regular family vacations. Although we don't have as much sex as when we first got married, we still have it a few times a week on average. I thought we loved each other deeply, and would say we would grow old together. Until today Annie is still roaring. Her face turns red as she continues to tell me what happened. Arthur, look at me. It's getting harder and harder for me to concentrate. But I turn to her. You must sign these papers. She continues to point at the papers in front of me. Her voice demands. But I find it hard to concentrate. As if the light and color in the room have faded. Although the lights are on in the kitchen, I am mentally disturbed, but my body does not respond. The more unresponsive I am, the angrier Annie gets. The last thing I can remember is Annie slapping me. I didn't feel the impact. I just thought it would leave a big red mark on my face. But I still can't move. The world continues to fall into darkness. It has been a long day. The college course was postponed due to an accident. The power outage, we were sent home. When I got home, I didn't understand what had happened. The house is very quiet. The lights are on. Floppy's car is there. But my mom's isn't. When I entered the kitchen, I threw my bag and books onto the chair. Dad was sitting at the table. He didn't move. He was just staring into space. On the other side of the table, there was a bottle of my mom's wine open, and an almost empty glass. In front of my dad was a stack of papers, with many sign here written on them. I walked behind my dad, patted his shoulder. Hi, Dad. I hope he turned after patting his shoulder. Hi, Dad. I hope he turned around, but he didn't respond. I went around to look at his face. I couldn't help but gasp. His eyes became dull, almost milky white. It looks like tears are flowing from his eyes. But he didn't blink. A string of saliva flowed from his mouth, began to drip onto his knees. I felt panicked. Dad, wake up, Dad. I couldn't help but cry. A minute later, Dad still didn't respond. I knew I had to calm down. I told myself to slow down, Sally. Dad needs help. I took out my phone and dialed 911. I clearly told them I couldn't get my father, Arthur Smith, to respond. They asked me for my details and address. I told them my name, Sally Smith, and our home address. They sent an ambulance. Told me to arrive in about 10 minutes. In the next few minutes, I sat, watching my dad, holding his hand. I talked to him softly. Let him know everything will be okay. This man gave me everything as I grew up. He worked a lot, but always attended my school activities, musicals and ballet. When I just started to learn to play the violin, he spent an hour and an hour, enduring the scream in my ears, always encouraging me. Finally, he saved enough money, bought me a water violin on my 16th birthday. Not bad. Not the best, but better than my other practice violins. 5 years later, I'm in college, majoring in strings and violin. I have 2 better violins, but this one holds a special place in my heart, because it was given to me by my dad. I didn't know what to do while waiting. Why Dad would be like this. What happened? I don't know where Mom is. Just then I looked at the papers, and those words, divorce petition, caught my eye. Damn it. I read the first page of the papers. A few minutes later, goosebumps rose on my spine. For some unknown reason, my mother wants to divorce my father. It seems very likely. Dad's condition was caused by these papers. And judging by the way Mom's wine was opened, she gave Dad the papers and left him. People are often surprised. Emotional changes are so fast. I believe this has never happened to them before. For me, I feel all the sympathy and the desire to be with my mother. A little bit later, it's gone. The ambulance arrived. They put Dad on a stretcher and took him to the hospital. I locked the house and followed by car. So I started to make calls on the road. I called my grandmother, my dad's mother, his sister Rhonda, his best friend. Then she called his work manager. Told him Dad would be away for a while. I told them I came home and found him unresponsive, on the way to the hospital. Everyone asked me to keep them informed of his condition. His manager told me he would arrange emergency leave for Dad and inform their boss. I know I'm delaying the next call because I'm very angry with her, but I decided I need to call my mom. The phone rang. She picked up after a few rings. Hello Sally, my dear, how was your day? Wow, just wow. Of course, my mom is not so naive to think I wouldn't know what happened. It's been almost an hour since I walked into the house and found Dad. Mom knows my schedule. From the timing, it's clear that I have already come home. Found out everything. Where are you, Mom? I left your father. She was silent, not wanting to say anything. I felt her hesitation. So in other words, you just destroyed my father, your husband, and left him without caring. No, dear, I tried to explain to your father, Paul. And what happened? But he didn't respond. So I thought it was best to leave. Let him realize we will never be together again. She tried to sound as if it was easy. However, given the state I found Dad in, it's very likely. She just simply tore his heart. When he was watching, threw it against the wall. If I guessed right, you abandoned him when he needed help. Are you really so ruthless? You know what happened, or you don't care. Anger began to seep into my voice. Dear, don't be angry. I know it's a bit shocking, but your dad will be okay. I just want to ask for what belongs to me. And some support from Paul waiting to marry me. Yes, my mom has lost touch with reality, evil. You haven't seen me angry yet, Mom. Let me tell you. I'm going to pick up my dad now. At the hospital. He is on the ambulance now. When I came home, he looked like he had a stroke. Sally, my dear. I'm sorry to hear that, but there's no fucking but Mom. Let me ask you, is this Paul? The one you're going to meet? Is it Paul you've been talking about at work? She hesitated. Yes, dear, Paul is the person my mother has been talking about at work. She never stopped talking about. So I guess he's more than 10 years younger than you. How long have you been having an affair with him? She hesitated again. 6 months. So in the past 6 months, you have been having sex with someone at work. Behind your father's back. You cheated on Dad and me. Hid your relationship with your lover. I don't know, you're such a damn slut, Mom. Obviously Dad doesn't know either. According to the state you just left him. Do you think any of us would be happy about this? Well, it may not be at first. But once we live with Paul, you will understand that we are a perfect match. She just mentioned the plural for the second time. She thinks I will leave my dad and go to live with her. And her asshole boyfriend. I feel like I'm about to be furious. I know if I don't stop, I will say something I can't take back. I'm going to hang up the phone now. Before I say something I might not be able to take back. But let me be completely clear. I will not leave Dad. And I will never go near Paul. Not to mention his house. Where you are having an affair with him. Sally Smith, she shouted, I am your mother. You will not talk to me like that. No matter how angry you are. Then I think we're done. I hung up the phone and didn't let her say anything else. If she thinks I will tolerate what she is doing, she's crazy. She tried to call me back a few times. Then she started calling my dad's phone. It's stupid because even if he has, I doubt he would answer her call. I have Dad's phone, so I ignored all her calls. When I arrived at the hospital, the ambulance staff had already admitted Dad. He was in the room for observation. Aunt Rhonda appeared. Let me know. She also received some calls from my mom. But I'm not sure what happened. Except that her brother is in the hospital. When I explained what happened, Aunt Rhonda's face turned so red that I can almost see steam coming out of her ears. Sally, do you have the papers that bitch left for my brother? Of course, Aunt Rhonda is here. In addition to being my aunt, Rhonda is also our family lawyer. So for the next hour, we sat next to Dad. Rhonda read the papers and took notes, occasionally muttering curses. Doctors and nurses come in and out of the room from time to time. Check on Dad. Well, the bad news is, your mother wants to divorce your father. The timeline outlined here shows this has been going on for more than 2 months. If it is not submitted this week, otherwise she will pay more than her legal fees. I shrugged. Because my mother can give me any excuse. Because of what she did. I no longer want my father to be with her. It's strange. I have never been Dad's little girl. I have always looked up to my mother. But her behavior is really disgusting. Paul, her soulmate, did it. Anyway, Mom and Dad should not be together anymore. Rhonda continued. The good news is, she hired a quick lawyer to represent her. She will have to pay him a lot of money just for the divorce. If the case goes to court, she will pay even more. She grinned. And my dear brother has the best lawyer in town. He will get a 100% family discount. That night we smiled at each other for the first time. In addition, some of the statements she wants. 50% of the money in the house. And 60% of financial assets. Plus spousal support and child support. It may be quite ridiculous. I guess from your reaction, you are not planning to live with your mother. I shook my head. Okay. I have some preliminary ideas. But we have to see how your father is in the next 24 hours. Your mother may already be in trouble. Because he abandoned him. May face charges of mental abuse. The next few days flew by. Doctors kept checking Dad. Physically he is fine and healthy. But he just doesn't respond. I was studying in the hospital chair. With a laptop and textbooks in hand. From time to time, a family member would come to give me a break. I would go home to sleep for a few hours. Change clothes and come back. I admit that when I was alone in the house, I cried a lot. One big surprise was the boss of the company where Dad works came to see him. Although I knew his manager Tom, I have never seen his real boss. Surprisingly, she is a woman. Tina Williams is a striking woman. Sexy, slim, tan skin. Black crow hair. And I can see the sparkling blue eyes, which may fascinate every living man and some women. It turns out that my father is one of the group of people in his work. A few years ago, when she went through a messy divorce for her cheating ex-husband tried to take her daughter and most of their savings, and almost got half of her business. Before Dad introduced her to Aunt Rhonda, Rhonda turned the situation around. Eliminated Tina. Had to give up any part of her business. And made sure Tina received child support for their daughter, who was 6 years old at the time. Tina came a few times. When I told her the general outline of what happened, she was shocked. Why is he in the hospital? She would bring cards from everyone at Dad's work. Sit down and hold his hand. Tell him the stories that happened in the workplace when he was not there. It turns out, my father is the party soul in the office. Everyone loves his pranks very much. I should tell you, Dad is a professional accountant. He works for a financial company, helping banks handle payments to financial institutions. This may be a tiring job, but apparently, my dad makes the workday brighter for everyone. About 2 weeks later, one afternoon, I just came back from home. When I entered the room, Rhonda and Tina were finishing their conversation. I can tell it was a bit intense, but their anger was directed at my mother, not each other. My mother wrote a letter to Tina, demanding to let her get all the bonuses Dad has received in the past few years. It doesn't matter that the money has already been paid. The letter demands that she remit 50% of it to a designated bank account within 30 days. Otherwise, she will sue Tina. In addition to the stupidity of demanding money that has already been paid, it seems that she and her new husband are short of money, because I froze all their joint assets, while Arthur is being treated. Rhonda said, with a very complacent smile on her face. I laughed and announced my presence. Yes, this morning, I received my first message from my mother in 2 weeks. A text message asking me to give her money. I didn't reply, because I am still very upset about her behavior. I mean, she has never asked about Dad since I told her what she did to him. In the past few weeks, Tina has become very worried. My father's hurt feelings. Every time my mother is mentioned, her eyes will narrow. Her voice will drop an octave, indicating that she deeply dislikes her. I can almost see flames appearing at the edge of those burning eyes. I just hope she never has to be in the same room with my mother. I'm worried she might burn it down. I may not love my mother now, but she is still my mother. She destroyed the most wonderful person. Sally, if it weren't for your father, I wouldn't have my Clarissa or my business. Many people in the office helped me during the most difficult moments of my life. But your father spent a lot of time listening to me. He never judged my ex-husband or me. He just let me vent. No one really did that. Did not express their opinions. He introduced me to your aunt. Made sure I was taken care of. If he was a single man, I would pursue him with everything I have. After the divorce, I shrugged and let the smile light up my face. Well, he will soon be a single man. It made them realize. Rhonda giggled, Tina smiled. Thank you, Sally. I needed this. I still can't believe what your mother did to him. Or that she rejected such a wonderful man. I have to go to the office, but first I'll do this. Tina walked over to my father, as Rhonda and I watched. Leaned over and gently, sincerely kissed his lips. She looked at us and smiled. But her smile turned to shock a second later. When I woke up, I felt soft lips on mine. Just the right amount of pressure. Behind them was a sense of sexiness and tenderness, conveying an emotion I haven't felt in a long time. I heard the beeping of medical equipment. and my own groans, as almost every muscle in my body ached. I expected Annie to be standing by my bedside. When I opened my eyes, after such a tender kiss. But Tina was there. Standing there with a smile on her face. Tina, Sally, and Rhonda came up from the other side of the bed. "It's okay, Dad. Everything is going to be all right, do you hear me?" My memory caught up with me a minute later. I realized Annie was leaving me. Or more likely, had already left me. "What happened, Ed?" In the next few minutes, the three of them filled me in. How Sally found me unresponsive and called an ambulance. How she found the divorce papers that said Annie had been cheating on me for years. I found out Annie had once threatened Tina. Rhonda blocked our finances until they figured out what happened to me. Rhonda replied, 2 weeks, Arthur. I looked at Tina. "Tina, did you kiss me?" Tina blushed. "Yes, I'm sorry." I was about to head back to the office, to say goodbye. I smiled. "Everything is fine. I've already been in the market, so I think it's okay." In the next few hours, I was examined by many doctors. Blood tests and MRIs. Tina canceled her visit to the office and stayed here. As well as Rhonda and Sally. One of the doctors who came to see me was a psychologist. I told him how I went home and found Annie drinking alone. She told me she was leaving me. Then I said, as she started to intensify, the world started to lose color. Light and sound disappeared. I had a hard time moving. Even though I wanted to. My last memory was Annie slapping my face, screaming at me. But I couldn't understand her words. When they learned that Annie was hitting me and I couldn't respond, all the girls gasped in unison. "Dad, when do you think this happened?" I would say around 5:30, "Sweetheart. Why do you need to know this?" "Because when I came home after 7:30 and found you." "So I think Mom must have left you alone for a long time." The psychologist interjected. "For people in your situation, being abused while they are unresponsive is not uncommon. In your case, I would say when you heard your wife announce that she was leaving you. You certainly. This is a more extreme case than what we usually see. But it makes sense." Rhonda said, "When Arthur was still a child, there was a bully a few years older than him. He often teased Arthur. One day, a parent in the community found Arthur lying on the ground in the park. According to what our parents told me, they put him to bed. The next morning he woke up. No one really thought about it, because the next day he woke up as usual. But it really happened." I nodded. I remember Billy pushing me and teasing me in the park. After a while I don't remember what happened. But when I woke up, Mom and Dad told me I had lost consciousness. Someone took me home. When I told them about Billy, they talked to his parents. The next day, Billy found me at school and apologized to me. I smiled at the memory. I don't think it was sincere. But he never bothered me again after that. "Well, I think we might have a repeat here," the psychologist said. "The mind is still a field that is not fully understood in many ways. However, if something like this has happened before, then it makes sense for it to happen again." I frowned, and he smiled. "I'm not too worried. With the love and attention of these 3 lovely ladies, even if it happens again, I think you will be well taken care of." We talked for a few more minutes. Then he got up and left. I also felt tired. This may sound strange for someone who has been sleeping for the past 2 weeks. But I'm tired. So I let the 3 girls go home and rest. Tell them they can come to see me tomorrow. Make sure I'm okay. The next 2 days brought me back to life. Tina brought me a work laptop and gave me some simple tasks to do, just to keep me busy. Rhonda stopped by, mainly to let me see the revised divorce papers and let me sign some papers. So she can dissolve my marriage with Annie. Rhonda also brought a young detective, Karen Hill. Detective Hill asked me for over an hour about my experience with Annie that night. She thanked me and informed Rhonda and me that we will receive her report in a few days. I'm not sure if we are filing a complaint against Annie. Finally, Rhonda told me to leave all this to her, kissed my forehead and left. On the afternoon of the second day after I woke up, I was released. As Sally said, discharged from the hospital and went home. Sally accompanied me. I was surprised when Tina met us outside the building and helped Sally support me towards her big SUV. Tina stayed that night for dinner. We ordered takeout. She helped clean up. Then, stayed and watched TV with us for a few hours. When she turned to leave, Sally hugged her, then made sure I walked her to her car. Tina, thank you very much for everything you've done over the past few weeks. I don't know how I can repay you, I said. Well, in a few weeks when you're feeling better again, you can invite me to dinner and dancing. She laughed, and I blushed. That afternoon I left the hospital. The woman had already invited me on a date. But she was very beautiful. I was about to be a bachelor again. Okay, next Friday night after work. This will give me almost 2 weeks to get back to normal. She nodded, came over and hugged me tightly. It lasted for a while. I felt more hidden meaning as she got into her car. I thought it was funny. I briefly wondered what the strange woman's name was. I had almost married her for 25 years. In the next few days, Sally, Rhonda and Tina were busy around me again, checking if I was okay. This was good. However, the news Rhonda brought that afternoon surprised me a bit. On Friday afternoon, Annie was arrested that afternoon, she said. What happened? I asked. Well, after your statement to the police at the hospital, an arrest warrant was issued for Annie, based on mental abuse of a disabled person. This is based on the fact that, at that moment, you couldn't move and couldn't defend yourself. Plus, she left you unattended or without help for a period of time. She's in big trouble. What does this mean for the divorce? Tina joined us for dinner. Her 8-year-old daughter, Clarissa, was with her that night. Clarissa was watching a Disney movie in the living room while we talked. I'm going back to work on Monday, so Tina will see me in the office. But I started to realize she needs more than just efficient number crunching in the office. I found myself imagining what's hidden under those beautiful, tight clothes she wears every visit. Rhonda smiled. This could mean something will be in Arthur's favor. According to the status of the bank accounts in the house, I insist on a 50-50 split. I know we can do more. But after so much has happened, I assume Arthur would want to be fair. I nodded. Annie won't touch any bonus funds she tried to get from you, Tina. I filed a case of extortion against her, in addition to the mental abuse charges. This won't have much effect, except to prevent her touching things that don't belong to her. She will likely be out in a few days. No worse for wear, and able to go back to her pig partner. What I want to do is use Arthur's visit to the hospital. Then I will plan according to her reaction. Quickly resolve the divorce, Rhonda said, smiling. So how long does the divorce take, Aunt Rhonda? Sally asked. I believe if everything goes well, it will take about 3 months. If Annie wants to fight for something, I will bring in the big guns. It will take longer, but it will hurt her more. That night when I walked Tina to the car, Sally helped Clarissa into the back seat. Tina hugged me again, and to my surprise, gave me a brief kiss, reminding me of the day I woke up a few days ago. Arthur, I know you're married. You are an honest man. So I am not going to rush things. But I want to claim you now. And let you know I want you. Of course, I've wanted you for a long time. But I would never pursue a married man. Or break someone's marriage vows. This happened to me. I don't want it to happen to anyone. Even if their marriage is falling apart. I gazed into her deep blue eyes for a moment. Then brushed a strand of her black crow hair from her face. Before I leaned in to kiss her. But instead of a soft and tender kiss, I let the kiss last for about 30 seconds of passion. I knew we both felt the connection. Tina's eyes closed as I parted. Her tongue ran around her lips, savoring our kiss. I grinned. So you know I've acknowledged your rights. We turned to look at the girls. Both of them were giggling, watching us kiss. Clarissa was clapping her hands. Sally had a big goofy smile on her face. As Tina and Clarissa drove down the driveway, Sally hugged me and we waved goodbye. The next few months were a roller coaster ride. On one hand, Annie wanted the divorce to move quickly. On the other hand, she was unhappy with the agreement. It seemed like Paul was in the driver's seat, telling her she should get most of the assets. He fed her a load of crap. To some extent, she had to know this. After all these years of marriage, as the settlement demands became more and more bizarre, Rhonda made a call to Annie's lawyer. Despite not knowing what was said, all the settlement objections stopped overnight. Tina and I met every Friday night. And Sally started babysitting Clarissa, picking her up from school and taking care of her, saving Tina and me time for dinner, drinking coffee, watching shows, or dancing. Of course, we did more than just hold hands and kiss. But I had a feeling my divorce night would be different. I went back to work. Everything was going well for us. As a financial institution, we made good profits, but we were not in the big leagues. We all did our jobs. And we were well compensated for it. We were usually happy together as a team. I think the staff realized that Tina and I were a couple. And although everyone was happy for both of us, I had to tone down my usual pranks. My direct manager reported to Tina, making sure no one talked about our behavior in the workplace. Because I was about to meet with his boss. About 3.5 months later, we received the notice. The divorce would be finalized within a week, starting from the following Thursday. No trial. But Annie requested a meeting before the final decision. I agreed the day before. We agreed. She would come to the house to see Sally and me. I took the afternoon off. Cooked lamb chops and dumplings with gravy. It was our 3 favorite dishes. I hoped it would make the evening's conversation less awkward. Sally came home around 5:30. Took a shower, changed clothes. Then just before 6 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Annie stood at the front door. Now I haven't described Annie yet. But maybe I will now. Before everything fell apart a few months ago, Annie was an attractive housewife in her 40s. She had short shoulder-length brown hair, a curvy mom body. Although she was a few pounds heavier than she liked, she was still very attractive. With a good chest and corresponding hips. She was a well-built woman. But unfortunately, the woman standing in front of me was almost unrecognizable. Annie had gained a lot of weight. She had sagging cheeks and chubby cheeks. Her belly was a bit swollen, now hanging over her pants. And that curvy mom hip I liked was swollen and unrecognizable. Moreover, she was wearing loose clothes that covered her figure. I don't object to fat women, but this was not Annie. I think my shock at her figure showed on my face. Annie shrank back, but said nothing. "Hi, Annie, come in." We walked into the kitchen. I offered her a glass of wine. She accepted. We chatted for a few minutes about trivial things. She asked about work, asked if I was taking care of myself. I asked about her job. No trouble. Commenting on how she should take care of herself. That's what Paul wanted. He didn't like me being too thin. So we worked hard to gain weight. She mentioned the unspoken question. I frowned. For over 25 years I have loved this woman. However, despite what she did to me, I still worry about her health. You disapprove, don't you? She looked at me. No, Annie, I don't know. When we were together, you were in great shape, physically fit. But to be honest, I am shocked at how you look. You don't look very well. If I wasn't so heartbroken, I would be very concerned about your health. And would try to help you. But you don't care, do you? Her face fell. You and Sally, happy and healthy without me here. Well, I do care about that part. But when you left here, basically left me to die. I shrugged, she sighed. I deserve this, I did a terrible thing, didn't I? No, Mom, Sally just got out of the shower. You did a damn terrible thing. You broke up a happy family. And walked out the door. Without caring. I don't understand why. Dad agreed to let you come here tonight. Sally calmed down. Your mother knows what situation we are in. We are all unhappy. It must have been difficult for her to come here. She asked for a meeting tonight. So I think the least we can do is act like adults. And listen to what she has to say. Sally is not happy. As far as I know. She hasn't spoken to her mother since that fateful day either. Judging by the way my daughter looked at her mother, this will not end well for either of us. It's time to change the subject. I tried to act cheerful. Difficult conversations are not suitable to be carried out on an empty stomach. Let's eat first. So I served dinner. No one spoke at the table. But many glances were exchanged. Sally stared at her mother the whole time. After dinner, I cleared the table. Annie asked to speak to Sally alone first. Not possible, you tell me what you want. In front of both of us. I was surprised. But I could see. Sally was determined not to be alone with her mother. I think Annie saw it too. The look in her eyes was the same as her mother's. That fateful night she did to me. She nodded. Annie took a deep breath. She didn't want to do this in front of me. But she looked at Sally. Okay, Sally, I want to ask for your forgiveness. For what I did that night. I know it's all wrong, anyway. I don't want to be separated from my daughter forever. Annie looked at me. There's one more thing. But I'd rather say it privately. Not in front of you, your father. I'm sorry, Mom, but if you can't say it to both of us, then I don't want to hear it. Before Annie could do anything else, Sally stood up and left. After a while, we heard her bedroom door slam. I hope everything gets better, Annie whispered. More for herself than for me. I think, considering everything, this has gone well. I told her, letting her know I heard her words. Yes, Annie. I think, considering everything, this has gone well. Annie was now looking at the floor. With tears in her eyes. They haven't hit the floor yet. But they are preparing to. I don't know if they are for Sally, for me. Or still just for herself. I continued, so our divorce will end tomorrow. If you have nothing to say, then I think we have met your request. For the final meeting. I walked to the door and opened it. Annie looked at me and left. After crossing the threshold, she turned to look at me. Arthur, we did have some good years, didn't we? Yes, Annie, most of the time we were together was great. You were a great lover. A caring partner and a loving mother. I don't know what that idiot Paul did. But I can't see any of the woman I fell in love with in the person standing in front of me. I only see a lost existence. manipulated by someone to gain weight. Like a damn pig, becoming selfish. Not caring about the people around. She looked at her feet again. Do you really think so, don't you, Arthur? Yes. She turned to leave, then turned around one last time. This time she looked very broken. Arthur, about the house and the money. Paul told me I should ask. So this is the point of this visit. Not about reuniting with her family. Just about money. I sneered. Go tell your partner. By this time tomorrow, you will receive your share in savings. In the house, in the bank accounts. Your lawyer gave it to Rhonda. And Annie, she looked at me. I warn you, keep the money away from Paul. Otherwise you won't have it for long. The next morning brought the final decree. Annie and I are no longer husband and wife. A small part of me feels sad. But that's a very small part. Most of the time I am very happy. The past few months have not been easy for anyone. Now I am finally free, at 48. I still have a lot of vitality. Rhonda called me. Said she would come to my house for pizza tonight. Sally came to the office at lunchtime. We talked about her mother and the happy times. When we were a family. I know she doesn't love her mother very much. But I know she misses the way she used to be. To be honest, I do too. We had a lot of good years together. Well, I think Sally and Tina had some kind of signal. Because as soon as Sally left, less than 5 minutes later, I was called into Tina's office. She slammed the door. Then kissed me like the sun would never rise again. Although I must admit, I probably kissed her back the same way. Now can I claim you as mine, Arthur? I felt a sore spot on my neck. Just as she kissed my neck. A minute ago, you might have been able to. That night's dinner was great. Sally, Rhonda, Tina, and Clarissa were with me. We celebrated my freedom from Annie. That Friday night, when the girls went to bed, Tina and I perfected our platonic relationship. I must have done something right. Because for the rest of the weekend, every time she sat down she made a slight squeaking sound. As if a little sore. But her fiery eyes burned with a flame. I knew only for me. 6 months later, we had a beautiful, small ceremony by the local lake. There were a lot of attendees, from work and attendance. We wanted to get married later. But we wanted to do it before Sally and Clarissa's brother was born. That was 5 years later. Sally, her boyfriend, Tina, and I just sat down to have dinner at our local restaurant. When 5-year-old Keegan asked, "Dad, who is this lady that keeps staring at us?" We all turned around and saw Annie sitting across from us. She had lost a lot of weight. She stared at us, looking dissatisfied with herself. We haven't seen her or heard from her since our divorce. She never even tried to contact Sally. I apologized to my family and walked over to them. "Hello, Annie, hello, Arthur, how are you?" She looked down at the chicken salad she was eating. "You were right, Arthur. You were right about him. Paul convinced me that I was his soulmate. And you were nothing. But when I didn't get the money up front, he convinced me to gain weight. Because he loved me, loved fat women. When I got the money after the divorce, you told me not to give it to him. But I didn't listen. He spent it in a few months. Then he left me. Disappeared without marrying me. I still felt uneasy about her. But her story didn't have a happy ending like mine. Since then, I have been trying every moment. Trying to rebuild the confidence he destroyed. And get back to who I was before." She held back tears and looked at me. So many years have passed. Her eyes were the eyes of the Annie I used to know. "Arthur, I'm sorry. I was terrible to you. I did this because I was convinced that Paul knew everything. You didn't. I left the only man who ever truly loved me. She stopped, clutching the edge of the table. You could have died because of what I did. I know you will never forgive me. But I wanted to say I'm sorry. Now she was crying openly. Surprisingly, Sally came over and stood next to me. She had also heard her mother's apology. I looked at her, she smiled at me wearily, holding my hand. I don't know, maybe. This was the first time she saw her mother. Really sorry. Her gaze softened. She reached out to her mother. Seeing Sally standing there, she reached out her hand. Annie panicked, trying to stand up and leave. But Sally blocked her way. Mom, stop, you don't have to go anywhere. Sally slid into the booth next to Annie. I sat on the other side. I looked at Tina and saw her nod. So for the next hour, mother and daughter talked. There was a lot of reconciliation. There were a lot of tears. But this time they were useful, not harmful. Once they finished talking, Sally and I took Annie to the table. Introduced her to the others. I could tell Annie was uneasy when she was introduced to Keegan as Aunt Annie. From that day on, we kind of let Annie back into our lives. Sally slowly got back in touch with her mother. They had coffee about every 2 weeks. Trust between them slowly grew. But it did grow. When Sally got married, Annie actually played the role of the bride's mother. Tina would occasionally invite Annie to our house for dinner. At first I thought it was out of spite for Annie. Because she gave up everything. Tina benefited by marrying me. However, although they were never close, Tina and Annie had a strange friendship that I could never understand. Rhonda never forgave Annie for what she did to me. Although she was always polite whenever they touched. Well, with Tina's blessing, Annie and I did some post-marital counseling. We discussed many issues since then. More than 5 years ago, the counselor believed Annie may have had a hormonal issue. However, Annie didn't admit it. No. That day I threw away the most important thing for me. I had a husband who loved me. And a daughter who wanted to be with me. There is no hormonal imbalance that can justify my way. I systematically destroyed everything good in my life. For a jerk who whispered sweet nothings in my ear. An asshole in the bedroom. And a man so small from the waist down that you can't even notice it's inside. She smiled sweetly at me with this statement. Arthur and Sally deserved better treatment. She cried, then wiped her tears with a tissue. It took 5 years for me to reconnect. I lost 5 years with them. I thank God every day. Arthur allowed me back into his life. And Tina, she blushed at this confession. She had every reason to hate me. But she treated me warmly every time she saw me. No, she was lucky. She got everything I threw away. I will pay for this for the rest of my life. Annie benefited more from these sessions than I did. Confirming Sally. Or that I didn't do anything to cause Annie to leave us. She was right. Tina picked us up and made us a stronger family. People will pay for their mistakes if they make them long enough. This is what Paul did. He moved to another state, trying to steal another married woman and her money. But this time the husband caught Paul and his wife and turned him into a unit. The husband was sentenced to 10 years. But it seems he will be released soon. If Rhonda's rumors are true. She now represents him. Tina and I are very much in love. I never thought I would be able to love so much again. And as deeply as my love for Annie. But Tina proved that it was not true. Tina not only gave me her love, but also gave me her entire soul without reservation. We still work in her company. I still have the same job. We have our ups and downs. But we never let anything get in the way of our communication. When it matters. Her body is still great, we make love often. We even make love in some exotic places during holidays. Usually a look is enough. I lock the bedroom door and make love to her. One day, we just finished making love. Took a shower, got dressed. When we got to the kitchen, we found Sally and Annie talking. Last month we found out that Sally was pregnant. So there was a buzz in the room as the girls planned. For my first grandchild. Oh my God, Sally, the way they behave. You would think these two were teenagers. Tina, you need to tell me what you gave Arthur. Maybe I can take some of this to feed Fred. All the girls laughed, and I blushed. Annie has started dating recently. But nothing serious, until Fred came along. Mom, let them be alone. We all know from then on. Dad was smitten. Since he was discharged from the hospital. In his past life. Annie was silent. Sally laughed, Tina blushed. For me, I just sat back, grinning at my girls. Watching Tina, feeling excited again. Then I stood up, walked back to the bedroom. Tina followed me after a while. Locked the bedroom door. Well, yes, I did check. Thanks to all who took the time to listen to today's story. If you like, please consider liking and subscribing. If not, feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.